12 Navy SEALs aimed their weapons at her skull. The warehouse rain hammered like war drums. She didn't flinch. "On your knees now." The woman stood 5'3", 115 pounds, hands loose at her sides like she was waiting for a bus. "You've made a mistake," she said quietly. The team leader laughed. "Lady, you're surrounded by the deadliest warriors on earth." Her eyes shifted. Something ancient. Something cold. "I told you, I'm a Marine combat master." And 2 seconds later, 12 elite operators lay scattered across concrete. The mocking stopped. The legend began. Subscribe. Now follow this story to the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first operative grabbed Kira Delgado's wrist at exactly 7:43 p.m. on October 17th, behind the Willow Creek Animal Clinic. He was 6'2", 220 pounds of government-trained muscle. His grip was designed to immobilize, control, dominate. Kira weighed 115 pounds, soaking wet. She broke his wrist in 3 places before he finished exhaling. "Contact!" the second man shouted, reaching for his sidearm. "She's resist." Kira's elbow connected with his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a violent rush. His weapon clattered against the pavement as he doubled over, gasping like a fish pulled from water. The third operative was smarter. He didn't try to grab her. He pulled his taser aimed center mass and squeezed the trigger. But Kira was already moving. She rolled behind the clinic's dumpster as the electrodes sparked against metal, came up with a chunk of broken brick in her hand. Her throw was pure instinct, 40,000 hours of training compressed into one fluid motion. The brick struck his weapon hand with surgical precision. The taser skittered across wet asphalt. 8 seconds. 3 trained operatives. All of them down. Kira Delgado stood in the rain, breathing normally, pulse barely elevated. Her scrubs were splattered with mud. Her hands, the same hands that had been treating a frightened golden retriever an hour ago, were steady as stone. "Who sent you?" she asked quietly. The first man groaned, cradling his shattered wrist. "You're making a mistake." "No." Kira's voice carried something ancient and cold. "You made the mistake. You came to my town. You threatened my life. And you underestimated me." She knelt beside him, her face inches from his. Her brown eyes held no anger, no fear, just calculation. "Tell your commander something for me. Tell him the girl he's looking for doesn't exist anymore. The woman who replaced her, she's much, much worse." Then Kira Delgado disappeared into the rain-soaked alleys of the town she had called home for 3 years, and the hunt began. 6 hours earlier, life had been beautifully ordinary. Kira arrived at the Willow Creek Animal Clinic at 7:30 a.m., same as every morning. Dr. Patricia Holloway was already there, coffee in hand, reviewing the day's appointments. "Morning sunshine," Patricia smiled at her young assistant. "Ready for chaos. We've got 3 spay surgeries, a dental cleaning, and Mrs. Cromwell's ancient cat, who I'm pretty sure is immortal." Kira laughed. It was a genuine laugh, something she had learned to do again over 3 years of carefully constructed normalcy. Mr. Whiskers is definitely powered by spite and wet food. "Aren't we all?" The morning passed in comfortable rhythm. Kira held trembling puppies while Patricia administered vaccines. She calmed anxious owners with soft words and patient explanations. She cleaned kennels, updated records, answered phones. To everyone in Willow Creek, she was just Kira, the quiet girl from California, who loved animals and kept to herself. No one knew that those gentle hands could field strip an M4 carbine in 14 seconds. No one knew that the calm brown eyes had watched men die in the mountains of Afghanistan. No one knew that the veterinary assistant had once been Lieutenant Kira Delgado, the youngest woman in Marine Corps history to earn Combat Master certification, and Kira intended to keep it that way. The first sign of trouble came at 2:17 p.m. Kira was in the back preparing surgical instruments when something made her freeze. It wasn't a sound, it was the absence of one. The normal ambient noise of Main Street had shifted almost imperceptibly. She moved to the window. A black SUV sat across the street. Engine running. Windows tinted too dark for Montana regulations. License plate from out-of-state Virginia, she noted automatically. Her heart rate increased by exactly 4 beats per minute. 3 years of peace, and her body still remembered how to recognize danger. "Everything okay?" Patricia called from the exam room. "Fine." Kira forced her voice to stay light. "Just thought I heard something." She watched the SUV for another 30 seconds. It didn't move. No one got in or out. Coincidence, she told herself. It's nothing. But the girl who had survived 12 combat deployments didn't believe in coincidence. By 4:00 p.m., 2 more vehicles had appeared. A gray sedan parked near the post office. A white van positioned at the intersection of Main and Cedar. All of them with government plates. All of them occupied by men who sat too still, watched too carefully. Kira's hands trembled slightly as she bandaged a beagle's paw. Not from fear, from recognition. She knew this pattern. She had orchestrated operations exactly like this one. They were boxing her in. "Kira," Patricia's voice cut through her racing thoughts. "You've been staring at that bandage for 2 minutes. You sure you're all right?" Kira looked up, smiled. "Sorry. Long night. Couldn't sleep. You work too hard. Go home early. I can handle the evening appointments." Every instinct screamed at Kira to run. Right now. Out the back door through the alleys into the mountains where she could disappear forever. But she had built a life here. Friends. Routines. A man named Jake, who made her laugh, and never asked about the scars on her shoulder. She wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. Not without knowing why. "Thanks, Patricia. I think I will." Jake Patterson was waiting outside when Kira left the clinic at 5:30. He leaned against his truck, all 6'1", of honest firefighter, with a smile that still made her stomach flutter after 8 months of dating. "Surprise." He held up a paper bag. "Got those tacos you like from Maria's." Kira's chest tightened. She wanted to warn him. Wanted to tell him to drive away, forget he ever knew her, save himself from whatever was coming. Instead, she kissed him softly and said, "You're my favorite person." "I better be." Jake opened the passenger door. "Come on. I'm taking you to the ridge. Sunset's supposed to be spectacular tonight." Kira hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the black SUV still parked across the street. "Actually, can we rain check? I'm not feeling great. Think I'm coming down with something." Jake's face fell. "Really? You seemed fine this morning. Hit me suddenly." She touched his cheek, memorizing the rough stubble, the warmth of his skin. "Tomorrow. Okay, I promise." "Okay." He kissed her forehead. "Call me if you need anything. Soup medicine, terrible movies, I'm your guy." Kira watched him drive away. She stood on the sidewalk until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then she walked home. But she didn't take her usual route. The alleys of Willow Creek had been Kira's first study when she arrived 3 years ago. While other newcomers explored restaurants and hiking trails, Kira had mapped every back street, every hidden passage, every escape route in a 10-mile radius. Old habits. Paranoid habits. Habits that had kept her alive through 12 deployments. Now those habits were about to save her life again. She moved through the shadows like smoke, using buildings to block sight lines, timing her movements to avoid the sweep patterns she had identified. The operatives were good, professional, disciplined, thorough. But Kira was better. She reached her cottage at 6:15 p.m., approaching from the forest behind her property. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, but the subtle changes screamed at her trained eyes. Her welcome mat was shifted 2 inches to the left. The curtain in her bedroom window hung differently than she had left it, and there were fresh tire tracks in the soft earth around her fence. They had been inside, searched her home, probably planted surveillance devices. Kira didn't go through the front door. Instead, she climbed onto her roof using handholds she had installed during her first week in Willow Creek, dropped through the modified skylight in her bathroom, landed silently on tile that she had chosen specifically because it wouldn't creak. The cottage was empty, but it felt violated. Kira moved quickly through darkened rooms, checking corners, clearing spaces. Her body shifted automatically into combat mode, shoulders squared, center of gravity, low senses, hyper-aware. In her bedroom, she found what she was looking for: a microscopic camera hidden in her smoke detector. State-of-the-art surveillance technology. They weren't just hunting her, they were studying her. Kira left the camera in place. Let them watch an empty room. She had more important things to retrieve. The basement of Kira's cottage held secrets that would have shocked her neighbors. Beneath a false floor that looked like ordinary hard wood, she had stored the remnants of her former life. Weapons, identification documents, emergency cash in multiple currencies, communications equipment that could reach certain people who owed her favors. Kira hadn't touched any of it in 3 years. She had hoped never to touch it again. Hope, she reflected grimly, was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. She changed quickly, efficiently. Off came the scrubs, stained with dog hair and antiseptic. On went black tactical pants, boots designed for silent movement, a fitted shirt that wouldn't restrict her arms. The transformation was remarkable, disturbing, like watching a butterfly climb back into its cocoon and emerge as something with teeth. Kira strapped on a tactical vest, holstered a pistol on her right hip, secured a backup weapon on her left ankle, added knives in 3 locations, small, sharp, easily accessible. Finally, she grabbed a compact backpack containing everything she would need to survive indefinitely on the run. 3 years of peace, 3 years of healing. 3 years of pretending she could be someone other than what the Marine Corps had made her. All of it erased in an afternoon. Kira allowed herself 30 seconds of grief. She thought about Patricia and the clinic, about Mrs. Henderson and her book club, about Jake, and the future they might have built together. Then she sealed those feelings away, locked them in the same mental compartment where she stored the screams of dying men and the weight of impossible choices. Lieutenant Kira Delgado was back, and someone was going to answer for dragging her out of retirement. The attack came at 7:43 p.m., exactly as Kira was leaving through her back door. 3 operatives, standard government extraction team. They had been positioned perfectly, 1 to intercept, 2 for backup clear fields of fire in all directions. They had prepared for a frightened civilian. They found something else entirely. 8 seconds later, all 3 were down. Kira stood among their groaning bodies, rain plastering her hair to her face, and felt nothing but cold calculation. She needed information. Needed to understand why, after 3 years of silence, someone had decided that Kira Delgado couldn't be allowed to remain hidden. The operative with the broken wrist was still conscious, still defiant. "You have no idea what you've done," he gasped. "You can't run from this. They'll find you. Who's they?" Kira's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Who sent you above my pay grade?" Wrong answer. She applied pressure to his broken wrist. Not enough to cause permanent damage, just enough to make clear that she could. The man screamed. "Commander Hayes, CIA Special Activities Division. That's all I know, I swear." Hayes. Kira recognized the name. She had worked with Special Activities once during a joint operation in Yemen. Hayes had been ambitious, ruthless, willing to sacrifice assets for political gain. If Hayes was running this operation, it meant someone very powerful wanted her back. "Why now?" Kira demanded. "Why after 3 years? There's a situation. They need you, specifically you." "I'm retired." The operative laughed bitterly through his pain. "Lady people like you don't retire. You just wait for the next war." Kira released his wrist, stood up, looked down at the 3 men who had thought they could take her easily. "Tell Hayes something for me," she said quietly. "Tell him I'm not the scared girl who ran away 3 years ago. Tell him if he wants me, he's going to have to come get me himself. And tell him—" She leaned close. "Tell him I remember what happened in Yemen. I remember who he sacrificed. And if he threatens the people I care about, I will burn his entire operation to the ground." Then, Kira Delgado vanished into the storm. And the hunt truly began. By midnight, Willow Creek had become an occupied territory. Kira watched from her position in the abandoned mining tunnels beneath the town as vehicle after vehicle arrived. SUVs, sedans, a mobile command center that bristled with communications equipment. She counted 47 operatives, military-grade weapons, surveillance drones, heat-sensing equipment, all of it for one 26-year-old woman who had just wanted to help injured animals. The absurdity would have been funny if the stakes weren't so deadly. Through her stolen radio, liberated from one of the operatives she had neutralized, Kira monitored their communications. What she heard made her blood run cold. Delgado is classified as a high-value target. Capture preferred, but elimination authorized if necessary. All civilian contacts are to be detained for questioning. Patterson Jake, Holloway Patricia, Reyes Victor. Full workup on everyone she's interacted with in the past 3 years. 24-hour deadline. If she doesn't surrender by 8 p.m. tomorrow, we escalate to enhanced measures. Enhanced measures. Government euphemism for making innocent people disappear. Kira's hands clenched into fists. They were going to hurt her friends, going to destroy the lives of people who had shown her nothing but kindness, whose only crime was living in the same town as a retired Marine. She should run. Every tactical instinct screamed at her to disappear into the mountains, use her survival training to vanish forever into the wilderness, where even the CIA couldn't find her. But running meant leaving Jake to their interrogations, leaving Patricia to their questions, leaving the entire town of Willow Creek to pay for her sins. Kira Delgado had spent 3 years trying to forget what she was capable of. Now she was about to remind everyone. The old mining tunnels connected to nearly every building in Willow Creek. Kira had discovered this during her first month in town, when restless insomnia had driven her to explore every possible escape route. The tunnels were a remnant of the town's silver mining past, abandoned, forgotten, and perfect for someone who needed to move unseen. She navigated by memory and touch, moving through absolute darkness with the confidence of someone who had trained in cave warfare. The tunnels were narrow in places, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but they provided something invaluable: access. Her first stop was the crawl space beneath the police station. Chief Robert Patterson Jake's father was arguing with a federal agent in his office. Kira pressed her ear to the floor grating and listened. I don't care what your credentials say. The chief's voice was tight with anger. This is my town. Those are my people. You don't get to storm in here and start treating everyone like suspects. Chief Patterson, this is a matter of national security. Kira is a good kid. Quiet, keeps to herself. Works at the animal clinic, for God's sake. You're telling me she's some kind of threat? I'm telling you she's one of the most dangerous individuals the military has ever produced. And I'm telling you that if she's not apprehended within 24 hours, this situation will escalate beyond anything your department can handle. Silence. Then the chief's voice, suddenly weary. What aren't you telling me? What did she do? That's classified. Of course it is. A long exhale. Fine. But I want a representative present for any interrogations of local residents. This is still America, and these are still citizens with rights. Noted. Kira moved away from the grating. Chief Patterson was a good man, honest, principled, protective of his community. Under different circumstances, she might have trusted him with the truth. But the federal agent's presence made that impossible. One wrong word, and the chief's integrity would become a liability. She was on her own. By 3 a.m., Kira had mapped the complete disposition of Hayes's forces. The mobile command center was positioned in the town square. 30 operatives patrolled in rotating shifts. Drones provided aerial surveillance on a 15-minute cycle. Communications were routed through a central hub that coordinated all team movements. It was a textbook occupation operation. Professional. Thorough. Overwhelming. And it had one critical weakness. Hayes himself. The commander had established himself in the old fire station, using its height advantage to oversee the operation. He emerged every 90 minutes to receive updates from team leaders following a predictable schedule that spoke to his military background. Predictability was death in Kira's world. She began planning her counterstrike using techniques she had developed during 12 combat deployments. Disable communications, create confusion, isolate the leadership, force a confrontation on her terms, not theirs. But first, she needed to understand why. Why had the CIA suddenly decided she was worth this much attention? Why were they willing to burn her cover alert the entire town and risk an international incident to bring her back? The operative had mentioned a situation. Something that required her specifically. Kira needed answers. And she knew exactly where to find them. Master Gunnery Sergeant Victor Reyes lived on a horse ranch 12 miles outside Willow Creek. He was 68 years old, officially retired, and the only person in Montana who knew Kira Delgado's real identity. He had been her mentor during her early Marine career, the man who had recognized her potential, pushed her beyond her limits, and shaped her into the warrior she had become. When Kira had requested permission to disappear, Victor was the one who had vouched for her, the one who had convinced the brass that she had earned her peace. If anyone knew why the government wanted her back, it would be him. Kira reached the ranch at 4:17 a.m., approaching through the horse pastures where she had spent countless evenings helping Victor with the animals. The farmhouse was dark, but she knew he would be awake. Victor Reyes hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since Vietnam. She tapped on his kitchen window, using a code they had established years ago. 3 quick, 2 slow, 3 quick. The back door opened 30 seconds later. Victor stood in the doorway, 70 inches of weathered marine, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a pistol in the other. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, swept over her tactical gear and hardened. They found you. It wasn't a question. Hayes, Kira said. CIA Special Activities. 40-plus operatives, full occupation of the town. Victor stepped aside to let her enter. I know. Been monitoring their communications all night? You knew they were coming. Suspected. He set down his coffee, holstered his weapon. Got a call 2 days ago. Old friend at Langley, warning me to make myself scarce. Why didn't you warn me? Because I hoped I was wrong. Victor's voice carried decades of weariness. And because there's something you need to know, something that changes everything. Kira felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Tell me. Victor walked to his kitchen table, where a laptop displayed encrypted communications that he definitely shouldn't have access to anymore. 3 weeks ago, a terrorist group acquired military-grade chemical weapons, enough nerve agent to kill 10,000 people. They're planning coordinated attacks on multiple cities. What does that have to do with me? Victor turned to face her. His expression was grim. The terrorist leader is Dominic Vance. The name hit Kira like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Dominic Vance, former Marine major, the man whose weapons smuggling operation she had exposed 3 years ago. The man who had sworn, as they dragged him away for court-martial, that he would make her pay for destroying his career. It gets worse, Victor continued quietly. Vance contacted the government directly, said he'll only negotiate with one person, said if they don't deliver Kira Delgado to him within 72 hours, he'll start the attacks. Kira's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily in Victor's kitchen chair. He's using me as leverage, forcing them to choose between thousands of lives and one person. It's a trap, Victor's voice was fierce. You know it's a trap. He wants revenge and he's using a terrorist threat to get it. I know. Kira stared at the floor, her mind racing. But if I don't go, if I run, 10,000 people die, and every one of their deaths is on your conscience. A silence stretched between them. Outside, the first hints of dawn were lightening the Montana sky. There's more, Victor said finally. Something the CIA doesn't want you to know. Kira looked up. What? Vance knew exactly where to find you. Knew your cover identity, your address, everything. That information was buried in files that maybe a dozen people could access. The implication was clear. Someone inside the government leaked my location. Not just someone. Victor pulled up another document on his laptop. I've been tracing the breach for 2 days. The leak came from a CIA liaison named Marcus Webb, someone you worked with during the Yemen operation. Webb. Kira remembered him ambitious, charming, always angling for his next promotion. He had been present when Hayes made the call that got 3 assets killed. He had helped cover it up. Why would Webb sell me out of gambling debts? He owes money to people connected to Vance's network. They offered to clear his slate in exchange for your location. Kira's hands clenched into fists. 3 years of peace, 3 years of healing, 3 years of trying to build a normal life, all of it destroyed because one corrupt agent couldn't pay his bookies. What do I do? She asked quietly. If I run, thousands die. If I surrender, Vance kills me and probably attacks anyway. If I fight. If you fight, Victor said firmly, you take control. You stop waiting for them to come to you. You go to them. Against 40-plus operatives, with Hayes running the show. Victor smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile in years. Kira, do you remember what I told you the day you earned your Combat Master certification? She did. She would never forget. You said I was the most dangerous person you had ever trained. I was wrong. Victor leaned forward, his eyes blazing with fierce pride. You're the most dangerous person I've ever known. Period. Those 40 operatives out there, they think they're hunting a scared girl who's been playing librarian for 3 years. He reached out and gripped her shoulder. Show them what a Marine Combat Master really looks like. Dawn broke over Willow Creek at 6:47 a.m. 47 federal operatives prepared for another day of searching. Commander Hayes reviewed his team's overnight reports. Drones circled lazily overhead. None of them noticed the woman moving through the tunnels beneath their feet. None of them realized that the hunter had become the hunted. And none of them understood that in exactly 12 hours, everything they thought they knew about Kira Delgado would be shattered. The Marine Combat Master was done running. Now she was going to war. Kira moved through the tunnels beneath Main Street at exactly 8:15 a.m. Her footsteps silent against the century-old stone. Above her head, 47 operatives were searching for a ghost. They swept buildings, questioned shopkeepers, reviewed security footage from every camera in town. They had no idea their target was directly beneath their feet, listening to every word they said through the old ventilation grates. Sector 4 clear. No sign of the target. Copy. Move to Sector 5. Command wants a full sweep by noon. Kira allowed herself a grim smile. Hayes was methodical, thorough, exactly the kind of commander who followed protocols and trusted his training. That predictability would destroy him. She checked her watch. In exactly 4 hours, Hayes would make his scheduled inspection of team positions. He would leave the fire station, walk to the mobile command center, and spend approximately 12 minutes reviewing status reports. 12 minutes. That was her window. But first she needed to understand the full scope of what she was facing. Kira pressed her ear against a grate beneath the town's only coffee shop. 2 operatives were taking a break, their voices casual in a way that suggested they didn't expect to be overheard. You really think one woman is worth all this? You didn't read her file? This chick took out a 12-man Syrian death squad, by herself, with a knife and a piece of rebar. Bullshit. I'm serious. Combat Master certification at 23. Youngest female in Corps history. The instructor said she scared them. A long pause. And she's been hiding here in this nowhere town, playing veterinary assistant, helping old ladies with their cats. Can you imagine? Honestly, that's what freaks me out. What kind of person can just switch off, go from killing machines to treating puppies, the kind you don't want to corner? Kira moved away from the grate. The fear in that operative's voice was useful. Fear made people hesitate. Hesitation created openings. She continued through the tunnels, building a complete picture of Hayes' operation. Guard rotations, communication frequencies, equipment positions, weakness after weakness catalogued and filed away for future exploitation. By 9:30 a.m., she had everything she needed. Now came the hard part. Jake Patterson was being questioned in the fire station's second-floor office. Kira watched through a ventilation shaft, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't afford to feel. Jake sat across from 2 federal agents, his firefighter's hands clenched on the table, his honest face twisted with confusion and growing anger. I'm telling you, I don't know anything. She's just Kira. Quiet, kind. She works at the animal clinic. Mr. Patterson, we have evidence that suggests your girlfriend is not who she claims to be. Evidence? What evidence? She makes me dinner. She helps my dad with yard work. She cried at the end of that stupid dog movie we watched last week. Sir? No. Jake's voice hardened. You don't get to come into my town and tell me that someone I care about is some kind of criminal. If Kira did something wrong, I want to know what. Specifically. Right now. The agents exchanged glances. That's classified. Of course it is. Jake laughed bitterly. Everything's classified. You people show up with your black SUVs and your fancy credentials, tear apart our community, and you can't even tell us why. Mr. Patterson, has Kira ever demonstrated unusual physical abilities, combat training, weapons proficiency? Jake stared at them like they had grown second heads. She's 5'3" and weighs about 100 pounds. She gets nervous around aggressive dogs. What kind of combat training are you imagining? Kira's throat tightened. Jake believed in her, believed in the person she had shown him, the gentle animal lover who made pasta on Sundays and laughed at his terrible jokes. That person had been real. For 3 years, that person had been beautifully, peacefully real. Now she was watching that person die one question at a time. "We need you to tell us if she contacts you," the agent said. "If she reaches out in any way, you call us immediately. Do you understand?" "Yeah." Jake stood up, disgust written across his face. "I understand that you people have lost your minds. And when Kira shows up and this whole thing turns out to be a mistake, I expect a personal apology." He walked out of the room without looking back. Kira watched him go, memorizing the set of his shoulders, the defiant tilt of his head. She wanted to call out to him, wanted to explain everything, but explaining would put him in danger. The less Jake knew, the safer he would be. Some protections required distance. At 10:47 a.m., Kira intercepted a communication that changed everything. She was positioned beneath the mobile command center using a device she had assembled from components in Victor's garage to tap into Hayes's encrypted frequencies. Most of the traffic was routine status updates, supply requests, shift changes. Then Hayes's voice cut through the static, speaking to someone with obvious authority. "Director, I need more time. Delgado is better than our intelligence suggested. You have 47 operatives and unlimited resources, Commander. One woman should not be this difficult. One woman took out 3 of my best extraction specialists in 8 seconds, with her bare hands, in the rain, while wearing scrubs." Silence on the line. When the director spoke again, his voice was ice. "The deadline stands. 72 hours from initial contact with the terrorist group. If Delgado isn't delivered to Vance by then, we proceed with contingency measures. And if she continues to evade capture, then we use leverage. Her boyfriend, her employer, her mentor, someone she cares about becomes collateral." Kira's blood turned cold. "Director, these are American citizens. Using them as bait would be necessary. Vance has enough nerve agent to kill 10,000 people. One woman's feelings are not worth more than 10,000 lives." "Understood." The communication ended. Kira remained frozen in the darkness, her mind racing. They were going to hurt the people she loved, not as a last resort, as a next step. Hayes had 48 hours before he started taking hostages. 48 hours to capture a woman who had evaded the entire Syrian military for 3 weeks with nothing but a knife. Kira's hands shook. Not with fear, with rage. She had played by the rules. She had buried her old life, built something new, asked for nothing but peace. And now they were going to punish the innocent people who had given her that peace. No, not this time. This time she would make the rules. Victor Reyes answered his encrypted phone on the first ring. "Tell me you have a plan." "I'm going to take Hayes." Kira's voice was steady, cold. "Tonight, before he can move against Jake or Patricia. You'll be walking into a fortified position with 40-plus hostiles. I know. They'll have thermal imaging motion sensors, armed guards on every approach. I know." Victor was silent for a long moment. "What do you need?" "The EMP generator you've been building in your workshop. The one you told me was for experimental purposes." A dry chuckle. "You know about that. I know about everything you've been building since you're tired. Electromagnetic pulse devices, signal jammers, that modified drone in your barn that definitely isn't legal." "Fair enough. What else?" "Information. I need to know everything about Marcus Webb, the agent who leaked my location. His connections, his debts, who he's working with. That might take time. You have 6 hours. Victor's voice softened. "Kira, are you sure about this? Once you move against Hayes, there's no going back. You'll be a fugitive. Everything you built here is already gone." Kira's voice cracked slightly. "They destroyed it the moment they drove into town. The only question now is whether I run and let them hurt my friends, or fight and protect them. That's not much of a choice. No, it isn't. She hung up the phone and checked her watch. 11:15 a.m. 6 hours until Hayes made his evening inspection rounds. 6 hours to prepare for the most important operation of her life. By 2:00 p.m., Kira had assembled everything she needed. Victor's EMP generator was the size of a large flashlight compact, devastating and completely illegal. One pulse would fry every electronic device within a 50-meter radius. Communications surveillance vehicles, all of it dead in an instant. But the EMP was just the beginning. Kira spent 2 hours moving through the tunnel system, placing small charges at strategic points around the town's infrastructure. Not explosives, something more subtle. Smoke generators, flash devices, noisemakers. She wasn't planning to hurt anyone. She was planning to create chaos. Chaos was her advantage. In confusion, training failed. In darkness, numbers meant nothing. In fear, even elite operatives made mistakes. And Kira Delgado had spent her entire career exploiting mistakes. At 3:30 p.m., she positioned herself beneath the fire station and waited. Above her, Hayes was reviewing afternoon reports, completely unaware that his entire operation was about to collapse. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years ago, she had walked away from violence forever, had promised herself that the killing was done, that her hands would heal instead of harm. Now those same hands were preparing to wage war against her own government. Some promises, she reflected, were impossible to keep. The first sign of trouble came at 4:47 p.m. Kira was monitoring Hayes's communications when a new voice entered the frequency, urgent, panicked, completely out of place in the professional military chatter. "Command, we have a situation at the Delgado residence. Someone's been here. Recent activity." Hayes's response was immediate. "What kind of activity?" "Footprints in the basement. Someone accessed a hidden compartment. And Commander, there's a message." A message. Written on the wall. It says, "You should have let me stay buried." Silence on the frequency. Then Hayes's voice, tight with barely controlled anger. "She's been in her own house, right under our noses. How did we miss this?" The basement access was concealed, professional-grade construction. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. Of course she did. Hayes exhaled sharply. "All units knew protocol. Assume Delgado has been monitoring our operations. Assume she knows our positions, our schedules, our communications. We are not hunting a scared civilian. We are engaged with a hostile combatant." Finally, Kira thought. He's starting to understand. But understanding came too late. The trap was already set. At 5:15 p.m., Jake Patterson did something that nearly destroyed Kira's entire plan. She was repositioning through the tunnels when she heard his voice echoing through the grate above her head. He was standing outside the fire station, arguing with a guard, and he was loud. "I want to see Commander Hayes, right now." "Sir, this is a restricted area." "I don't care what it is. You people have been questioning my neighbors, following my friends, treating this whole town like a crime scene. I want answers." "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Or what you'll arrest me for standing on a public sidewalk." "Go ahead. I'll call every news station in Montana and tell them how the federal government is terrorizing a small town to find one missing woman." Kira's heart stopped. Jake was going to get himself killed. His stubborn honesty, the same quality that had made her fall for him, was about to put him directly in Hayes's crosshairs. She had to do something. Had to intervene before, "Let him in." Hayes's voice cut through the commotion. Kira pressed closer to the grate, straining to hear. "Commander, let Mr. Patterson in. I want to talk to him." The guard hesitated, then stepped aside. Jake walked past him with his shoulders squared, radiating the kind of righteous anger that got people hurt. Kira followed through the tunnels, positioning herself beneath Hayes' office. She could hear everything. The scrape of chairs, the click of a closing door, and then Hayes' voice, calm and measured. "Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming. I didn't come to be thanked. I came for answers." "I understand. Please sit." A pause. Jake's voice was suspicious. "You're being awfully polite for someone who's been treating my girlfriend like a terrorist." "That's because I need your help." Kira went rigid. This was wrong. Hayes was supposed to be dismissive, hostile, bureaucratic. This sudden cooperation meant Kira Delgado is in danger. Hayes continued smoothly. "Not from us. From someone much worse. A former military officer named Dominic Vance has threatened to kill her along with thousands of innocent civilians unless we bring her to him." "That's insane." "I agree, which is why we're trying to find her first. To protect her." "Protect her?" Jake's laugh was bitter. "You've got 50 guys with guns turning our town upside down. That's not protection. That's a manhunt." "It looks that way, I know, but the truth is more complicated." Hayes' voice dropped, becoming intimate, confiding. "Kira has skills that Vance wants to exploit. She's been hiding from him for 3 years. We're trying to bring her in safely before he can get to her." "Skills, what skills?" "She's a veterinary assistant." "Mr. Patterson, how well do you really know her?" The question hung in the air. Kira held her breath. "I know enough," Jake said finally. "I know she's kind. I know she works hard. I know she loves animals and makes terrible coffee and laughs at jokes that aren't funny." "But do you know where she came from? What she did before she came here?" Silence. "She told me she was a teacher in California, that she wanted a quieter life." "And you believed her?" "Why wouldn't I?" Hayes' voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. "Because people who want quieter lives don't have hidden compartments in their basements. They don't know how to disable 3 trained operatives in 8 seconds. They don't disappear like smoke when an entire federal task force is looking for them." More silence. When Jake spoke again, his voice was smaller, uncertain. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Kira Delgado isn't who you think she is. I'm saying that the woman you've been dating for 8 months has secrets that would terrify you. And I'm saying that if you really care about her, if you want to help her, you need to help us find her before Vance does." Kira closed her eyes. Hayes was good. Manipulative, ruthless, but good. He was turning Jake against her, using concern as a weapon. And it was working. "If I knew where she was," Jake said slowly, "I would tell you. But I don't. She hasn't contacted me. Hasn't called, hasn't texted, nothing. But she might. And if she does, I need you to let us know immediately, not to capture her, to save her. And if I don't believe you, if I think this whole thing is exactly what it looks like, a government operation to kidnap an innocent woman." Hayes' voice hardened slightly. "Then I would remind you that we're dealing with a terrorist threat that could kill thousands of people. I would remind you that obstruction of a federal investigation is a serious crime. And I would remind you that your father is the police chief of this town, which means your family's reputation depends on doing the right thing." The threat was clear, even wrapped in reasonable language. Cooperate or suffer. Jake stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "I'll let you know if she contacts me." "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. I knew you'd understand." Jake left without another word. Kira stayed frozen in the tunnel, her mind churning. Hayes had just recruited the man she loved as an informant. If Jake saw her now, he might actually call it in, not out of malice, but out of confused concern. Another relationship destroyed by duty. Some prices never stopped being paid. At 6:30 p.m., Kira received Victor's intelligence package via dead drop. The information on Marcus Webb was worse than she had expected. The CIA liaison hadn't just leaked her location for gambling debts. He was part of something larger, a network of corrupt officials who had been using classified information for profit for years. Webb had sold out 3 other protected assets before her, all of them to criminal organizations with deep pockets. But the most disturbing revelation was about Dominic Vance himself. According to Victor's sources, Vance's chemical weapons weren't just terrorist acquisitions. They had been supplied by elements within the U.S. government officials who wanted a crisis that would justify expanded surveillance powers and military authority. Vance wasn't a rogue terrorist. He was a weapon being pointed at the American people by their own leaders, and Kira was the match they intended to use to light the fuse. The conspiracy was monstrous in scope. Politicians, intelligence officials, defense contractors, all of them benefiting from chaos that would cost thousands of innocent lives. Kira's hands trembled as she processed the implications. She had thought she was fighting for her own survival. Now she understood that the stakes were infinitely larger. If she surrendered to Hayes, she would be delivered to Vance and killed. The attacks would proceed as planned, and the conspirators would use the tragedy to consolidate power. If she ran, the attacks would still proceed. Thousands would die. The conspirators would win. The only path forward was through. She had to stop the attacks, expose the conspiracy, and survive long enough to see justice done. One woman against an army of corruption. Kira smiled grimly. She had faced worse odds. At 7:45 p.m., Commander Hayes left the fire station for his evening inspection. Kira watched from her position in the shadows, counting his security detail. 4 men, heavily armed, professional spacing and movement patterns. They weren't enough. She activated the first smoke generator at 7:46. Dense gray fog began pouring from a drainage grate near the town square, triggering immediate alarm among the operatives. Command, we have visual obscuration in Sector 2. Unknown source. All units investigate. Could be a diversion. Exactly, Kira thought. The second generator activated at 7:47. Then the third. Within 2 minutes, the center of Willow Creek was shrouded in artificial fog visibility, reduced to less than 10 feet. Hayes's security detail closed ranks around him, weapons drawn, shouting into radios that were suddenly filled with conflicting reports from every sector. Contact in Sector 4. Negative. Sector 4 is clear. It's Sector 5. I've got movement near the library. That's my team. Hold fire. Chaos. Beautiful orchestrated chaos. Kira moved through the fog like a predator through water. Her training took over angles of approach, sight lines, timing. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. The first guard never saw her coming. She emerged from the fog, struck the nerve cluster in his neck, and caught him as he fell, lowered him silently to the ground. The second guard turned at the sound of rustling fabric. He was fast, professionally fast. His weapon came up in a textbook response. But Kira was faster. She was inside his guard before he could acquire a target. Her hands found his weapon redirected, twisted. The gun clattered to the pavement. Her knee connected with his solar plexus. Down. 2 guards in 4 seconds. 2 remaining. The third guard opened fire blindly into the fog panic, overriding training. Kira dropped low, rolled, came up behind him. A precise strike to the back of his knee. A follow-up to the base of his skull. Down. The fourth guard was smart. He grabbed Hayes and pulled him toward the fire station, retreating to defensible ground. Kira let them run. She needed Hayes isolated, scared, desperate. She followed through the fog, a ghost made of violence and vengeance. Hayes made it inside the fire station and slammed the door behind him. His remaining guard was already on the radio calling for backup. All units, commander is under attack. Fire station, immediate support requested. Kira activated the EMP. The pulse was invisible. Silent, devastating. Every electronic device in a 50-meter radius died instantly. Radios went silent, lights went dark. The sophisticated security systems that Hayes relied on became expensive paperweights. In the sudden darkness, Hayes heard something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A woman's voice, calm and cold, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "You should have let me stay buried." Hayes fumbled for his backup weapon in the darkness, his hands trembling for the first time in 20 years of service. "Johnson, report." His remaining guard didn't answer. The man had been standing 3 feet away seconds ago. Now there was only silence and the sound of a body hitting the floor. Hayes spun, pistol raised, aiming at nothing. The darkness was absolute, his eyes strained uselessly against the black. "Delgado," his voice echoed off the walls. "This doesn't have to end badly. We can negotiate." A soft laugh came from his left. He fired twice. The muzzle flash illuminated empty air. "You sent 47 men to kidnap me from my home." Kira's voice moved, impossible to track. "You threatened to torture my friends, and now you want to negotiate. I was following orders. So was everyone at Nuremberg." Hayes pivoted toward the voice. Fired again. Another miss. "You don't understand the situation," he said desperately. "Vance has chemical weapons. Thousands of lives are at stake. I'm trying to save people. By sacrificing me. By doing what's necessary." Silence. Hayes's heart pounded against his ribs. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cold. When Kira spoke again, her voice was directly behind him. "Let me tell you what's necessary." Hayes spun. Something hard struck his wrist. His pistol flew from his grip. A second strike hit his knee, dropping him to the floor. Before he could recover, cold metal pressed against the back of his skull. "Necessary?" Kira continued quietly. "Is understanding who you're really working for. Necessary is knowing that Vance's chemical weapons came from inside your own government. Necessary is realizing that you're not saving lives, you're helping to end them." Hayes froze. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Webb, your liaison. He didn't just leak my location. He's part of a network that supplied Vance with everything he needed to launch these attacks. Politicians, defense contractors, intelligence officials, all of them profiting from chaos." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Kira increased the pressure slightly. "Ask yourself why Vance specifically requested me. Why he knew exactly where I was hiding. Why your superiors are so desperate to deliver me to him rather than simply eliminating the threat." Hayes's mind raced. The pieces began clicking together in ways he didn't want to acknowledge. "They need me dead," Kira said. "I'm the only person who can expose what really happened in Yemen. The assets you sacrificed. The deals you covered up. Webb knows I have evidence. Vance knows it too. This entire operation isn't about stopping terrorism. It's about burying the truth." "I didn't know." "But you suspected." Kira's voice hardened. "You've always suspected. You just didn't care enough to ask questions." Hayes said nothing. There was nothing to say. "Now you're going to help me," Kira continued. "You're going to tell me everything about Vance's operation, location defense's timeline, and then you're going to call off your men and let me do what I do best. And if I refuse, then I leave you here in the dark and I figure it out myself. But your career ends either way. The only question is whether you go down as the man who helped stop a conspiracy or the man who enabled it." The gun pressed harder against his skull. "Choose." Hayes talked for 47 minutes. Kira listened in the darkness, recording everything on a device she had brought specifically for this purpose. The commander's voice was hollow, defeated the voice of a man watching his illusions crumble. Vance's compound was in the Colorado mountains, 63 operatives, military-grade security systems, chemical weapons stored in a reinforced bunker that could withstand a direct missile strike. The attacks were scheduled for 72 hours from now. Coordinated strikes on 5 major cities, 10,000 casualties minimum, probably more. But the most valuable information was about the conspiracy itself. 3 senators, 2 defense contractors, a deputy director at the CIA. All of them connected through a web of shell companies and offshore accounts, all of them betting on chaos. They call themselves the Restoration Council, Hayes said bitterly. They believe the country needs a crisis to wake up, something that will justify the security measures they've been trying to implement for years. Mass murder as political strategy. They don't see it that way. They see themselves as patriots. Kira's stomach turned. She had met men like this before. Men who wrapped atrocity in flag and duty. Men who slept soundly after signing death warrants. Webb is the linchpin, Hayes continued. He coordinates between Vance and the council. If you can get to him, you can prove the connection. Where is he? D.C. But he's scheduled to fly to Colorado tomorrow. Final preparations for the attacks. Kira processed this. Webb in Colorado meant all her targets in one location. Efficient, dangerous. Exactly the kind of operation she was trained for. One more question, she said. Why me, of all the people Webb could have sold out? Why was I worth the risk? Hayes was silent for a long moment. Because you're the only one who survived Yemen. The only witness to what really happened. Webb thought you were dead, everyone did. When he found out you were alive hiding in Montana. I became a loose end. You became a threat. The evidence you have, the things you saw, it could bring down the entire council. Vance wants revenge, but Webb wants silence. Permanent silence. Kira stood up slowly, removing the gun from Hayes's head. Get up, when Hayes struggled to his feet, disoriented in the darkness. What happens now? Now you make a choice. You can go back to your masters and tell them I escaped. They'll probably kill you anyway once they realize how much you've compromised, or you can help me stop this. Help you how? By doing nothing. Pull your men back. Tell them I'm in the wind heading for Canada. Buy me 48 hours. And then I end this, one way or another. Hayes was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice carried something Kira hadn't expected: shame. I've done terrible things in service to this country. Things I justified because someone with more stars told me they were necessary. But this... He exhaled heavily. This isn't service. This is murder. Does that mean you'll help? It means I won't stop you. Hayes paused. But Delgado, if you fail, if Vance releases those weapons, I won't fail. How can you be sure? Kira smiled in the darkness. Because I'm not fighting for duty or orders or someone else's agenda. I'm fighting for the people I love. And that's something your council will never understand. She moved toward the door, silent as shadow. Delgado. Hayes's voice stopped her. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all of it. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead commander. But stopping the next massacre might. She disappeared into the night. By midnight, Kira was 50 miles outside Willow Creek, driving a truck she had borrowed from Victor's ranch. The old Marine had protested, insisted on coming with her. She had refused. This is my fight, Victor. My mess to clean up. You're 26 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this alone. I've been carrying it since I was 19. 7 years of secrets and violence and impossible choices. She had touched his weathered face gently. You gave me everything I needed to survive. Now let me use it. Victor had pressed a satellite phone into her hands. Military-grade encryption, untraceable. If things go sideways, you call. I'll bring the cavalry. There is no cavalry anymore. Just me. There's always been just you, Kira. That's what makes you dangerous. She had hugged him then, the first real embrace she had allowed herself in 3 years. Victor had held her like a father holding a daughter going off to war. "Come back," he whispered. "Whatever happens, come back." "I'll try." Now, hours later, she drove through the darkness with the mountains growing larger on the horizon. Vance's compound was still 600 miles away. She had 36 hours to cover the distance, infiltrate the facility, and stop an attack that could reshape American history. Impossible odds. Exactly her specialty persuade. The first complication came at 3:47 a.m. Kira had stopped at a remote gas station to refuel when her stolen radio crackled with an emergency broadcast. "All units, priority alert. Subject Delgado confirmed heading south on Route 87. Intercept teams deploying to checkpoints Alpha through Delta." Hayes had lied. Or someone had overridden his stand-down order. Either way, she was being hunted again. Kira abandoned the truck, immediately disappearing into the forest before the first helicopter appeared overhead. She moved through trees and underbrush with practiced efficiency, her body remembering survival skills that 3 years of peace hadn't erased. 2 hours of hiking brought her to a small town she had never heard of. She found a diner just opening for the morning shift, slipped inside, and ordered coffee while she planned her next move. "Traveling alone, hun?" The waitress was 60-something, kind-eyed, with the easy manner of someone who had seen everything. "Just passing through," Kira said. "At 5 in the morning must be quite a journey." "You could say that." The waitress poured coffee without being asked. "Running from something or running to something?" Kira looked up, surprised by the question. "Both," she admitted. "That's usually how it goes." The waitress smiled. "Whatever it is, I hope you find what you're looking for." "Thank you." "And hun, whatever you're running from, don't let it catch you. Some things, once they get their teeth in, they don't let go." Kira wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "I know. That's why I'm not running anymore." She stole a motorcycle from behind a hardware store at 6:15 a.m. The owner would find cash and an apologetic note in his mailbox within the week, assuming Kira survived long enough to arrange it. For now, speed mattered more than courtesy. The motorcycle 8 miles hungrily, weaving through mountain roads that grew steeper and more treacherous as she approached Colorado. Kira pushed the engine hard, knowing that every minute of delay gave Vance more time to prepare. By noon, she had covered 300 miles. By evening, she was within striking distance of the compound. And that's when her phone rang. Not the satellite phone from Victor, her personal phone, the one she had abandoned in Willow Creek. The one that should have been untraceable. The caller ID showed Jake's name. Kira's finger hovered over the answer button. This was wrong. Jake didn't have this number. No one should be able to reach this device, unless it was a trap. She answered anyway. "Hello." "Kira." Jake's voice was strained tight with fear. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours." "Jake, how did you get this number?" "A man gave it to me. Said you'd answer if it was me calling." Her blood ran cold. "What man? He didn't give his name. Just said to tell you that he has something you want." Jake's voice cracked. "Kira, what's happening? Who are these people? They showed up at the station, said they'd hurt my dad if I didn't help them find you." "Jake, listen to me carefully. Where are you right now?" "I don't know. Some kind of warehouse. They blindfolded me. Drove for hours." "Is anyone with you?" "There's a guard outside the door. Kira, I'm scared. These people aren't cops. The way they talk, the way they move, they're something else." Kira's mind raced. Vance had taken Jake, using him as leverage, just like the council had planned. But how had Vance known about their relationship? How had he gotten access to her phone number, Webb? It had to be Webb. The CIA liaison had access to everything, her files, her cover identity, her personal relationships. "Jake, I need you to stay calm." Can you do that for me? I'm trying. Good. I'm coming to get you. But I need you to trust me. Trust you? Jake laughed bitterly. I don't even know who you are anymore. The Fed said you were some kind of super soldier. That you've killed people, that everything you told me was a lie. Kira closed her eyes. Not everything. My feelings for you were real. Are real. I just couldn't tell you the truth about my past. Why? Because I wanted to be someone else. Someone who didn't have blood on her hands. Someone who could make pasta on Sundays and laugh at your jokes and pretend the world wasn't full of monsters. Silence on the line. When Jake spoke again, his voice was softer. Were you ever going to tell me? I don't know. I hoped I'd never have to. And now I'm going to save your life. And then if you still want to talk, I'll tell you everything. Every mission, every secret, every scar. Kira, a new voice cut in, smooth, cultured, dripping with satisfaction. How touching. The legendary combat master brought low by love. Dominic Vance. Kira's grip tightened on the phone. Let him go, Vance. He's not part of this. He became part of this the moment you decided to care about him. Fascinating, really. I spent 3 years trying to find your weakness. Turns out it was hiding in a small-town fire station the whole time. What do you want? What I've always wanted. You. Delivered to my compound within 12 hours alone and unarmed. In exchange, I release your boyfriend and cancel the attacks. You're lying. Perhaps, but can you afford to take that chance? Vance's voice hardened. 12 hours, Delgado. Come alone or watch everyone you love die. The line went dead. Kira stood on the side of a mountain road, phone in hand, and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her shoulders. If she surrendered to Vance, he would kill her. Probably slowly. Probably painfully. And the attacks might proceed anyway. If she refused, Jake died. And thousands more would follow. The only option was the one Vance hadn't considered. The one nobody ever considered. She would walk into his trap, spring it deliberately, and then she would destroy everything he had built. Kira dialed Victor's satellite phone. Tell me you have good news, the old Marine said. Vance has Jake. He wants me to surrender within 12 hours. A long pause. So what's the play? I'm going in. Alone against 60+ hostiles. I'm not going to fight them, Victor. I'm going to break them. How? Kira smiled grimly. By being exactly what they're afraid of. The compound emerged from the mountain darkness at 11:47 p.m. Kira had approached on foot for the last 5 miles, avoiding roads and trails that might be monitored. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was crystal clear. The facility was exactly as Hayes had described. Reinforced perimeter, guard towers with overlapping fields of fire, motion sensors and thermal cameras covering every approach, a fortress designed to repel armies. But Kira wasn't an army. She was a scalpel. She spent 2 hours observing, noting patterns and weaknesses. The guards were professional, but complacent. They had been told to expect a surrendering prisoner, not an infiltrating operative. At 2:00 a.m., she began her approach. The cave system behind the compound was narrow and treacherous, just as Victor's intelligence had suggested. Kira navigated by touch, squeezing through passages barely wide enough for her shoulders, ignoring the claustrophobic pressure of tons of rock above her head. She emerged in a depression behind the armory exactly where she needed to be. The building's rear wall was solid concrete, but concrete could be breached with the right tools. Kira pulled a compact cutting device from her pack and went to work. 20 minutes later, she was inside. The armory was everything Kira had feared. Crates of military weapons, rows of chemical weapons canisters, delivery systems designed for maximum casualties. But she also found something she hadn't expected: documentation. Shipping manifests, payment records, communication logs, all of it linking the weapons directly to the Restoration Council. Kira photographed everything, uploading the images to secure servers that Victor could access. Even if she died tonight, the evidence would survive. Then she began rigging the armory for destruction. The charges were small, but precisely placed enough to incinerate the chemical weapons without dispersing them enough to destroy the evidence trail that the council was counting on. She was halfway through when a voice froze her blood. "I knew you wouldn't surrender." Kira spun. Dominic Vance stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 armed guards. He was older than she remembered, grayer, harder, with eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. "You never could resist playing hero," Vance continued, "even when the smart move was to run. Where's Jake? Safe, for now." Vance stepped into the armory, his guards spreading out to cover the exits. "But that changes depending on what happens in the next few minutes." "Let him go. This is between us." "Actually, it's between you and everyone you've ever wronged." Vance smiled coldly. "Do you know how many people's lives you destroyed, Delgado? How many families were torn apart because of your missions? How many children grew up without fathers because you were very, very good at killing? I followed orders, same as you. I followed opportunity. There's a difference." Kira's hands itched for the weapon at her hip, but the angles were wrong. 4 guards, all with clear sight lines. She might take 2 before the others cut her down. Not good enough. "What do you want, Vance, really? Because this isn't just about revenge." "No, it's about legacy." Vance gestured at the chemical weapons surrounding them. "When these attacks hit, the country will panic, demand action, accept restrictions they would never have tolerated before. And the people who made it possible will become the most powerful men in America. You're a pawn. The council will dispose of you the moment you're inconvenient." "Perhaps, but I'll dispose of you first." "That's enough." Vance raised his hand. The guards lifted their weapons. "Goodbye, Combat Master. You were almost impressive." Kira smiled. "Almost isn't good enough." She dropped to the floor as the first shots rang out, rolling behind a crate of weapons. Her hand found the detonator in her pocket. The armory exploded into chaos. Fire and smoke and screaming. Kira moved through the destruction like a dancer, using the confusion she had created to neutralize guards one by one. Her training took over strike, disable, move. Strike, disable, move. 3 guards down in 12 seconds. The 4th guard was smarter. He retreated toward Vance, providing cover for his employer. But Vance was already running. Kira pursued through corridors filled with smoke, her lungs burning, her eyes streaming. Alarms wailed. Emergency lights strobed red. Operatives scrambled in every direction, trying to respond to an attack they hadn't expected. She caught Vance at the compound's command center. He spun, drawing a weapon, firing twice. Kira felt one bullet tug at her sleeve. The other missed entirely. She closed the distance before he could fire again. The fight was brutal and brief. Vance had been a Marine, once trained, dangerous, experienced, but 3 years of commanding from safety had softened him. Kira had spent those same 3 years pretending to be soft. The difference showed. She disarmed him with a wrist lock, drove her knee into his solar plexus, followed with an elbow to the temple that dropped him to his knees. "Where's Jake?" she demanded. Vance coughed blood. "Basement, cell 3. And Webb, conference room, upstairs." Vance laughed weakly. "You won't get to him, you won't—" Kira's fist connected with his jaw. Vance collapsed unconscious. She zip-tied his hands and feet, then pulled out her phone. "Victor, Compound is compromised. Armory destroyed. Vance is down. I need extraction for a civilian hostage and one high-value target. Cavalry's already en route. Hold tight. Not yet. There's one more thing I need to do. She hung up and headed for the stairs. Webb was waiting. Marcus Webb was waiting in the conference room with a gun pointed at Jake Patterson's head. Kira froze in the doorway, her weapon raised, her heart slamming against her ribs. Jake sat bound to a chair, his face bruised, his eyes wide with terror. Webb stood behind him, using the firefighter's body as a shield. "Drop it," Webb said calmly, "or I paint the wall with his brains." Kira's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot was there, a narrow window between Jake's shoulder and Webb's temple. She had made harder shots in worse conditions. But Jake's eyes met hers, pleading, trusting. She lowered her weapon. "Kick it away." Kira kicked the gun across the floor. It skidded to a stop against the far wall. "Hands up. Turn around slowly." She complied, her mind racing through options. Webb was CIA trained, experienced, dangerous. He wouldn't make the same mistakes Vance's guards had made. "You know this doesn't end well for you," Kira said quietly. "The compound is compromised. Your weapons are destroyed. Vance is in custody." "But I have leverage," but Webb pressed the gun harder against Jake's temple. "That counts for something." "Kira." Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they were following me. I thought I could help." "This isn't your fault." "Touching." Webb's voice dripped contempt. "The legendary combat master brought down by a small-town boyfriend. You should have stayed dead, Delgado. You should have let the world forget you existed. Like you forgot about the assets you sold out the operatives who died because you needed to pay your gambling debts." Webb's face tightened. "I did what I had to do. You murdered innocent people for money." "I removed complications." Webb shrugged. "There's a difference. Is that what I am? A complication? You were supposed to be dead. 3 years ago, when Vance was convicted, you were supposed to disappear permanently. But you just had to survive. Had to keep breathing. Had to be a loose end that I couldn't tie off." Kira heard footsteps in the corridor behind her. Multiple people approaching. Webb's reinforcements or her extraction team, there was no way to know. She needed to stall. "The council is finished," she said. "I uploaded everything from the armory. Shipping manifests, payment records, communications. By morning, every intelligence agency in the world will have proof of what you've done. Then I have nothing left to lose." Webb's smile was cold. "Which means neither does he." His finger began to squeeze the trigger. Kira moved. Time slowed to a crawl. Her body remembered patterns drilled through 1,000 repetitions. The angle of Webb's arm. The distance between them. The fraction of a second before a trigger engaged. She dove forward and right her hand closing around a letter opener on the conference table. The blade left her fingers before she hit the ground, spinning end over end toward Webb's gun hand. The throw was perfect. The letter opener struck Webb's wrist, slicing through tendons. His shot went wide, punching a hole in the ceiling. The gun clattered from his nerveless fingers. Kira was on him before he could recover. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, doubling him over. Followed with a knee to his face that snapped his head back. Grabbed his injured arm and twisted until she heard something pop. Webb screamed. "That's for the assets in Yemen," Kira said coldly. "And this," she struck him in the throat, not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to collapse his windpipe temporarily. Webb dropped to his knees, gasping, choking. "Is for making me watch." She left him writhing on the floor and rushed to Jake. "Are you hurt?" I'm okay." Jake's voice shook as she cut his bindings. "Kira, How did you... That was... Later," She helped him to his feet, steadying him when his legs threatened to buckle. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then we need to move. Now." The corridor was chaos. Operatives ran in every direction, some fleeing the compound, others trying to organize a defense against an enemy they couldn't see. Smoke poured from the destroyed armory. Alarms wailed. Emergency lights strobed red. Kira moved through the pandemonium with Jake pressed close behind her, using the confusion as cover. She had memorized the compound's layout from Hayes's briefing: 3 rights, 2 lefts down 1 flight of stairs, and they would reach the vehicle bay. "Kira!" Jake's hand gripped her arm. "Wait. We don't have time. There are other prisoners in the basement. I heard them. Women, children. Vance was holding them for something." Kira's stomach clenched. Hostages. Of course Vance would have hostages. Insurance policies in case something went wrong. How many? I don't know, dozen, maybe more. She checked her watch. Victor's extraction team would be arriving in 8 minutes. If she diverted to the basement, she might miss the window. But leaving innocent people to die wasn't an option. "Change of plans," she said. "Stay close." The basement was worse than Jake had described. 18 people huddled in 2 cramped cells. Families of military personnel, journalists who had gotten too close to the truth, whistleblowers who had tried to expose the council. All of them terrified. All of them expecting to die. Kira shot the locks off both cells. "Everyone up. We're leaving." A woman in her 40s stepped forward, clutching 2 young children. "Who are you?" "Someone who's getting you out of here." "Can you walk?" "We'll crawl if we have to." "Good. Stay together. Stay quiet. Move when I move. Stop when I stop." She led them through the compound's lower levels, avoiding the main corridors where operatives still scrambled. Jake helped support an elderly man who couldn't move quickly. A teenage girl carried her younger brother on her back. They reached the vehicle bay at 2:47 a.m. 3 transport trucks waited, keys still in the ignition. Kira loaded the hostages into the first 2 vehicles, checking each person for injuries, counting heads, making sure no one was left behind. "Jake, can you drive?" "Yeah." "Take the first truck. Follow the access road north until you reach the main highway. Victor Reyes will have people waiting at the junction." "What about you?" Kira looked back toward the compound. Smoke was still rising from the armory. Somewhere inside, Webb was either dead or being captured by operatives who didn't know their organization had just collapsed. "I have one more thing to do." "Kira, no. You've done enough. Come with us." She touched his face gently. The same face she had memorized over 8 months of dinners and movies and quiet walks. The face of a man who still didn't understand what she was. "There's a server room on the 3rd floor. It contains backup copies of everything: the council's communications, their bank accounts, their operational plans. If I don't destroy it, they'll regroup. They'll start over. And everything I've done tonight means nothing. Then let Victor's team handle it. Victor's team doesn't know where it is. I do." Jake's jaw tightened. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe." She kissed him quickly, fiercely. "But some things are worth dying for." She turned and ran back into the burning compound before he could stop her. The server room was guarded by 6 men. They were the best Vance had: former Special Forces elite mercenaries, professionals who knew they were the last line of defense. They had barricaded themselves behind overturned furniture weapons trained on the only entrance. Kira didn't use the entrance. She came through the ventilation system, dropping silently behind their defensive line. By the time the first guard realized something was wrong, 2 of his teammates were already down. The fight was savage and brief. Kira moved like water through their formation, using their own bodies as shields, their own weapons against them. A strike to the throat, a dislocated shoulder, a shattered kneecap. Each movement precise, economical, devastatingly effective. 18 seconds. 6 guards. All of them neutralized. Kira stepped over their groaning bodies and approached the server rack. The destruction took 3 minutes. She pulled drives, smashed components, set thermite charges that would reduce everything to slag. The Council's digital fortress, their carefully constructed network of secrets and lies, vanished in a cascade of sparks and melting metal. Then she heard a voice she recognized. "Impressive work." Kira spun. A man stood in the doorway, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had commanded armies. General Arthur Merrick, Deputy Director of the CIA, the highest-ranking member of the Restoration Council. "I wondered if you'd make it this far," Merrick continued. "The others said you were overrated. A relic from a simpler time. I knew better." Kira raised her weapon. "Hands where I can see them." Merrick smiled and complied. "Are you going to shoot me, Lieutenant, an unarmed man that would look very bad in the tribunal?" "There's not going to be a tribunal. There's going to be a prison cell and a very long sentence. Perhaps, but perhaps not." Merrick's eyes were cold. "Do you know how many contingencies we've built into this operation? How many fail-safes? Even with the armory destroyed and the servers burned, we have resources you can't imagine." "I've been hearing that a lot tonight. Somehow it keeps not being true." "This time it is." Merrick's smile widened. "You see, Lieutenant, the attacks were never dependent on Vance's chemical weapons. Those were just theater, a distraction to keep people looking in the wrong direction." Kira's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The real weapons have been in place for months, deployed in cities across the country, waiting for a signal that I alone control." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Merrick pulled a phone from his pocket. "One call, Lieutenant. That's all it takes. 10,000 deaths attributed to a terrorist group that doesn't exist. And the country falls into our hands exactly as planned." Kira's finger tightened on the trigger. "You'd murder 10,000 people just to prove a point." "I'd murder 100,000 to save the nation. That's the difference between people like you and people like me. You think in terms of individuals, I think in terms of civilization. You think in terms of power. Same thing." Merrick began dialing. "Last chance, Lieutenant. Walk away. Disappear into whatever quiet life you've built. Let history unfold as it must. Or watch me make a phone call that kills everyone you've ever tried to protect." His thumb hovered over the send button. Kira made her choice. She dropped her weapon. The clatter of metal on concrete echoed through the ruined server room. Merrick's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Interesting. I didn't expect surrender." "I'm not surrendering." Kira's voice was calm. "I'm buying time." "For what?" "For this." The ceiling exploded. Victor Reyes descended through the hole on a repelling line weapon blazing. 2 more operators followed, laying down suppressive fire that drove Merrick back from the doorway. Kira dove for her gun, rolled, came up firing. Her first shot destroyed Merrick's phone. Her second caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Her third would have killed him, but Victor's voice cut through the chaos. "Alive. We need him alive." Kira adjusted her aim. Her bullet struck Merrick's knee, instead dropping him screaming to the floor. Victor landed beside her, his weathered face creased with concern. "You okay?" "Define okay." "Breathing, all limbs attached. No arterial bleeding." "Then I'm great." Kira moved toward Merrick, who was trying to crawl away despite his shattered leg. "But we have a problem." "The other weapons." "He said they're already deployed. Waiting for a signal. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we need to make him talk. He won't. Not voluntarily. Kira knelt beside the general, looking into eyes that held nothing but contempt. But he doesn't have to talk. He just has to unlock his phone. She picked up the shattered device. The screen was cracked, but the electronics might still function. Victor, do we have anyone who can recover data from this? Already called it in. Tech team is en route. Merrick laughed through his pain. You're too late. The signal is scheduled to broadcast automatically at dawn. Even if you recover the phone, even if you crack my encryption, you won't have time to locate all the weapons. Then we'll work fast. You'll fail. Kira stood up slowly. Maybe, but you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell either way, and everyone will know what you tried to do. Every history book will name you. Every child will learn about the monster who tried to murder 10,000 people for power. I'm a patriot. You're a war criminal. Kira turned away. Victor, get him out of here. I need to contact Hayes. Commander Hayes answered on the first ring. Delgado, I heard explosions. What's your status? Compound is secured. Vance and Webb are in custody. Merrick is being evacuated now. Merrick, Hayes's voice sharpened. General Arthur Merrick, Deputy Director. Merrick, the head of the council. He was here coordinating the final phase. Silence. Then Hayes exhaled heavily. This goes higher than I thought. It goes to the top, but we have a bigger problem. Merrick said there are secondary weapons already deployed in major cities. Chemical or biological, he didn't specify. They're set to trigger automatically at dawn. That's less than 3 hours. I know. Do you have any way to locate them? We're working on recovering Merrick's phone, but even if we succeed, we might not have time to neutralize all the devices. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something Kira hadn't heard before: determination. I'm mobilizing every resource I have. FBI, DHS, local law enforcement. We'll saturate every major city with detection teams. You'll cause panic. Better panic than 10,000 body bags. Hayes paused. Delgado, you've done more than anyone could have expected. Get out of there. Let us handle the rest. I can't. That wasn't a request. I don't work for you, Commander. I never did. Kira looked out the window at the approaching dawn. There's one more thing I can do. One more place I need to be. Where? The first target. The one Vance was most obsessed with. The one he talked about even when he thought no one was listening. Hayes's breath caught. You know where it is. I think so. If I'm right, it's the largest device. The one designed to maximize casualties and maximize fear. Where Delgado, tell me and I'll send every asset we have. There's no time for that, and I might be wrong. Kira grabbed her pack and headed for the door. But if I'm right, I'm the only one who can get there in time. Kira, Hayes, if this doesn't work, tell Jake. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him it was real. Every moment of it. She hung up before he could respond. The motorcycle was waiting where she had left it beyond the compound's perimeter. Kira pushed the engine to its limits, racing down mountain roads as the sky began to lighten. Every mile brought her closer to either salvation or death. There was no middle ground anymore. Vance had been obsessed with one location above all others. A symbol of everything he believed the country had lost. A place where maximum casualties would cause maximum trauma. The Denver Memorial Children's Hospital. 800 children. Staff, parents, visitors. 2,000 people, maybe more, all of them innocent, all of them vulnerable. If Kira was wrong, she would waste the last hours before the attacks trying to stop something that wasn't there. If she was right, she might save hundreds of lives, or die trying. The hospital emerged from the dawn haze at 5:47 a.m. Kira abandoned the motorcycle in the parking garage and ran. The device was exactly where she expected it to be. Sub-basement 3, maintenance access, hidden behind a false panel that only someone with Vance's military background would think to install. The bomb was sophisticated, designed to disperse chemical agents through the hospital's ventilation system. A timer counted down 00:17:34. 17 minutes until 2,000 people died in agony. Kira knelt beside the device, her hands steady despite her racing heart. She had trained in explosive ordnance disposal at Camp Pendleton, had disarmed IEDs in Afghanistan, car bombs in Syria, booby traps in a dozen countries. But this was different. This bomb had been built by someone who knew her training, someone who had anticipated that she might find it, someone who had designed it specifically to resist the techniques she would use. The timer ticked down 00:15:22. Kira studied the device with desperate focus. 3 trigger mechanisms, all interconnected. Cutting any single wire would detonate the bomb. Disrupting the power supply would trigger a backup battery. Removing the chemical canisters would activate a pressure sensor. 00:12:47. There had to be a weakness. Every bomb had one. Every system had a flaw. She found it at 00:09:31. The timer's display was connected to the main circuit through a fiber optic cable. If she could interrupt the signal without cutting the wire, create interference that would confuse the system without triggering the fail-safes. Her phone buzzed. A message from Victor. Secondary devices located in 4 cities. Disposal teams en route. Status. She didn't have time to respond. 00:07:15. Kira pulled a small device from her pack, a frequency jammer she had borrowed from Victor's workshop. If she calibrated it exactly right, she could disrupt the fiber optic signal for 3 seconds, long enough to disconnect the timer from the detonator. Maybe. 00:05:42. Her hands moved with surgeon's precision. The jammer powered on. She adjusted the frequency, watching the timer's display flicker. 00:04:18. The display went dark. Kira held her breath. 1 second. 2. 3. The display came back on 00:04:15. The timer had stopped. She disconnected the chemical canisters with trembling hands, sealing them in containment bags she had brought from the compound. Then she sat back against the cold concrete wall and laughed. A broken, exhausted, relieved laugh that echoed through the empty basement. 800 children would wake up this morning without knowing how close they had come to never waking up again. That was enough. That would always be enough. Dawn broke over Denver at 6:23 a.m. Kira emerged from the hospital's service entrance into golden morning light. Police cars were converging on the building, Hayes's people finally arriving. Too late to help, but in time to clean up. Her phone rang. Victor. "It's done," she said before he could speak. "Device neutralized. Children safe. The other cities are reporting the same. All secondary devices located and disabled." Victor's voice cracked slightly. "You did it, Kira. You stopped them." "We stopped them." "No. This was you. From the beginning. A 26-year-old woman against an entire conspiracy. And you won." Kira looked up at the hospital windows where lights were beginning to flicker on. Somewhere inside, children were waking up. Parents were stirring. Nurses were starting their morning rounds. Normal life. Precious, fragile, beautiful, normal life. "I didn't win," she said quietly. I just made sure nobody lost. That's the same thing. No, Victor, it really isn't. She hung up and walked toward the rising sun. The war was over. Now came the hardest part. Going home. 6 months later, Kira Delgado stood in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., and watched justice unfold. Marcus Webb shuffled toward the defendant's table in orange prison jumpsuit and shackles. The man who had sold her location, who had enabled the deaths of countless assets, who had nearly murdered 10,000 innocent people, that man couldn't meet her eyes. All rise. The courtroom stood as Judge Patricia Harmon took her seat. Kira remained standing longer than necessary, watching Webb's shoulders hunch with the weight of what was coming. Mr. Webb, you have been found guilty on 17 counts of treason conspiracy to commit terrorism and accessory to murder. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Webb's lawyer whispered something urgent. Webb shook his head. No, Your Honor. Then it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none to give. The gavel fell like a thunderclap. Kira exhaled, slowly releasing tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 6 months. Around her, the courtroom erupted in murmurs, journalists scrambling for the exits, family members of Webb's victims embracing federal agents, exchanging grim satisfaction. Justice. Finally, after everything. She turned to leave and found Commander Hayes blocking her path. Delgado. Commander. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. The last time they had spoken face to face, she had been holding a gun to his head in a darkened fire station. I wanted to thank you, Hayes said finally. What you did, it shouldn't have been possible. One person against an entire conspiracy. I had help. You had Victor Reyes and a stolen motorcycle. That's not help. That's stubbornness. A ghost of a smile crossed Kira's face. Same thing sometimes. Hayes extended his hand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About Willow Creek, about hunting you, about all of it. Kira looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she shook it. We both did what we thought was right. The difference is I was right. Yes. Hayes's voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. You were. He walked away without looking back. Kira watched him go, wondering if he would ever sleep soundly again. Wondering if she would. The trials had consumed the past 6 months. Dominic Vance received 4 consecutive life sentences for terrorism, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit mass murder. He had shown no remorse, had made no apology, had simply stared at Kira throughout his sentencing with eyes full of cold hatred. This isn't over, he had said as they led him away. There are others, more than you know. Then I'll stop them too. General Arthur Merrick's trial had been the most sensational. A deputy director of the CIA exposed as the mastermind of a conspiracy that nearly killed 10,000 Americans. The media had called it the trial of the century. Merrick had tried to cut a deal offering information on other council members in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecutors had listened to his offer, extracted every name he could provide, and then rejected his deal anyway. Some crimes, the Attorney General had said publicly, are beyond negotiation. 3 senators, 2 defense contractors, 14 intelligence officials, all of them arrested, charged, convicted. The Restoration Council had been dismantled piece by piece, its members scattered to federal prisons across the country. But the public never learned the full story. The government had classified most of the details, citing national security concerns. Americans knew that a terrorist attack had been prevented, that corrupt officials had been exposed, that justice had been served. They didn't know about the woman who had made it possible. Kira preferred it that way. The drive back to Montana took 3 days. She could have flown, but she needed time to think. Time to process everything that had happened. Time to decide who she wanted to be next. The woman who had left Willow Creek 6 months ago was gone. The quiet veterinary assistant, the gentle animal lover, the girlfriend who made pasta on Sundays, that person had been burned away in warehouse firefights and desperate bomb defusals. But the combat master who had replaced her couldn't stay forever either. That woman belonged to a world of violence and shadows, a world Kira had tried to escape 3 years ago. She needed to find something in between. Victor Reyes was waiting when she pulled into his ranch at sunset on the 3rd day. The old Marine looked older than she remembered, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. The past 6 months had been hard on both of them. "Took you long enough," he said gruffly. "Traffic. From DC to Montana must have been hell. You have no idea." Victor pulled her into a hug that surprised them both. He wasn't a demonstrative man, hadn't been since Vietnam had carved away whatever softness he'd once possessed. But something about this moment demanded more than words. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "Your father would have been proud of you." Kira's eyes stung. Victor had known her father had served with him, had been there when he died, had promised to look after his daughter. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have." Victor released her, stepping back with his usual gruff composure. "That's what made you dangerous. You never needed anyone. You just chose to let people help." Is there a difference? All the difference in the world? Willow Creek looked exactly the same. The same quiet streets, the same friendly faces, the same peaceful rhythm that had drawn Kira here 3 years ago, seeking escape from a world that demanded too much. But everything had changed. The townspeople knew who she was now. Not the details, those were still classified, but enough. They knew that the quiet girl who had worked at the animal clinic was actually a decorated Marine. They knew that federal agents had turned their town upside down searching for her. They knew that she had stopped something terrible from happening. Some of them looked at her with fear now. Others looked with awe. A few looked with something that might have been gratitude. But everyone looked differently than before. Mrs. Henderson flagged her down outside the grocery store, clutching Kira's hands with surprising strength for a woman of 73. "I knew," the old woman said fiercely. "I always knew there was something special about you, the way you carried yourself, the way you noticed everything. You weren't just a librarian. You were something more. I was just trying to live quietly, Mrs. Henderson. Quiet people don't fight like you did. Quiet people don't save thousands of lives." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were bright with tears. "My grandson is alive because of you. He was supposed to visit that hospital in Denver the day of the attacks. If you hadn't stopped them." Kira didn't know what to say. She had spent so long hiding, so long pretending to be ordinary, that accepting gratitude felt foreign, uncomfortable. "I'm glad he's safe," she said finally. "So am I." Mrs. Henderson released her hands. "Welcome home, dear. This town needs people like you." The animal clinic was closed when Kira arrived. A for sale sign hung in the window. Patricia Holloway had retired 2 months after Kira's disappearance, unable to handle the constant questions from journalists and federal agents. Another casualty. Another piece of the life Kira had built destroyed by forces beyond her control. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at the darkened building where she had spent 3 peaceful years, where she had learned to be gentle again, where she had remembered that her hands could heal instead of harm. "It's not your fault." Kira turned. Jake Patterson stood behind her, hands in his jacket pockets, expression unreadable. Jake. Patricia was already thinking about retiring. The federal investigation just gave her an excuse. That doesn't make it better. No, it doesn't. Jake moved to stand beside her, both of them looking at the empty building. But blaming yourself won't help either. The silence stretched between them. 6 months of silence broken only by occasional phone calls that said nothing and meant everything. I should have told you, Kira said quietly. About who I was, what I did. Yeah, you should have. I wanted to protect you. Wanted to keep you separate from that world. I know. Jake's voice was gentle. But you don't get to make that choice for me. You don't get to decide what I can and can't handle. You're right. I usually am. A surprised laugh escaped Kira's lips. The sound felt strange, unfamiliar, after months of tension and trauma. I missed you, she admitted. I missed you too. Jake finally turned to face her. The woman I fell for. The one who made terrible coffee and laughed at my jokes and cried at sad movies. Is she still in there somewhere? I don't know. Maybe. Parts of her. That's enough for me. Even knowing what I am, what I've done. Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious. My dad was a Marine. Did you know that? Kira shook her head. Vietnam, 2 tours. Came back different according to my grandparents. Quieter, more careful. Used to wake up screaming sometimes. Jake's jaw tightened. He never talked about what happened over there. Never explained why he checked every exit when we entered a restaurant, why he sat with his back to walls, why he flinched at loud noises. Jake. I grew up watching him carry something he couldn't put down, something that shaped every moment of his life. Jake met her eyes. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you've been through, but I know what it looks like when someone's survived hell and come out the other side. And you're okay with that. I'm okay with you. Jake reached out and took her hand. All of you. The librarian and the combat master. The woman who treats puppies and the woman who takes down conspiracies. I want to know both of them. Kira's vision blurred with tears she didn't try to hide. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. The weeks that followed were harder than any mission Kira had ever completed. Rebuilding trust was different from building it the first time. Every conversation carried weight. Every silence had meaning. Jake asked questions that hurt to answer, and Kira answered them anyway. She told him about her first kill, an insurgent in Afghanistan who had been about to detonate a suicide vest, about the nightmares that followed the faces she still saw when she closed her eyes. She told him about Yemen, the assets they lost because of Webb's betrayal, the guilt that had driven her to request discharge. She told him about the 3 years in Willow Creek, how hard it had been to pretend, how desperately she had wanted the pretending to become reality. Jake listened to all of it, didn't flinch, didn't judge, didn't try to fix her. You're not broken, he said one night, holding her, as she trembled with memories she couldn't escape. You're just reassembling. Is that different? Broken things stay broken. You're choosing to put yourself back together. That takes more strength than anything you did in that compound. The government came calling 3 months after Kira's return to Willow Creek. A black SUV pulled up outside Victor's ranch, different from the ones that had hunted her, but similar enough to make her reach for a weapon she no longer carried. The woman who stepped out was small, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. Director Catherine Shaw, head of the CIA. The person who had taken over after Merrick's arrest and conviction. Lieutenant Delgado, may we speak? Kira stood her ground. That depends on what you want to say. I want to offer you a job. Not interested. You haven't heard the offer. I don't need to. I'm done with that life. Shaw nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. The country needs people like you, Lieutenant. People with skills and principles. People who can't be bought or intimidated. The country has plenty of people like that. Find someone else. There is no one else. Shaw's voice hardened. The Restoration Council is destroyed, but the conditions that created it still exist. Corruption, ambition, the willingness to sacrifice innocence for power. These things don't disappear because we arrest a few generals and senators. Then change the conditions. I'm trying, but change takes time. And while I'm working on the long game, someone needs to handle the immediate threats. Shaw stepped closer. I'm not asking you to become an assassin or a spy. I'm asking you to help me build something better, a response capability that operates in the open with oversight and accountability. Kira was silent for a long moment. No. Shaw's eyebrows rose. No explanation, just no. I gave everything I had to this country. My youth, my peace, nearly my life. And in return, the country tried to feed me to a terrorist. Kira's voice was steady, but fierce. I owe the government nothing. The government owes me the right to choose my own path. Shaw regarded her with something that might have been respect. Fair enough. She pulled a card from her pocket and placed it on the fence post. If you ever change your mind, call this number, day or night. I won't change my mind. Perhaps not. Shaw returned to her SUV. But the offer stands, for as long as you need. The SUV pulled away, disappearing down the dirt road in a cloud of dust. Kira picked up the card, studied it for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket, just in case. 1 year after the compound assault, Kira Delgado opened a new business in Willow Creek. Not an animal clinic. Patricia had taken that with her when she retired. Something different. Something that felt right, a training center for veterans. The building was nothing special, an old warehouse converted into a gym classrooms and counseling spaces. But the services it offered were transformative. Combat skills translated into civilian applications. Tactical thinking applied to business and life challenges. Physical training that honored military discipline while building new purposes. And most importantly, a place where veterans could talk about what they'd experienced without judgment or fear. Kira had recruited the staff personally, therapists who understood trauma, instructors who had walked the same paths, a community of people who knew that some wounds never fully healed but could still be survived. Jake designed the building's electrical and plumbing systems. Victor served as senior advisor, sharing wisdom accumulated over 40 years of service. Mrs. Henderson organized the community outreach program, making sure every veteran in the county knew help was available. The center opened on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Kira's peaceful life had exploded into violence. She stood at the entrance, watching veterans file in, some confident, some hesitant, some barely holding themselves together. All of them carrying weight that civilians couldn't understand. You ready for this? Jake asked, his hand warm in hers. No. Kira smiled. But I'm going to do it anyway. Sounds about right? The first veteran to approach her was a young woman barely 22 with haunted eyes and trembling hands. She had served 2 tours in Syria before a roadside bomb ended her career and started her nightmares. I heard you understand, the young woman said quietly. What it's like, what we carry. I do. Does it ever get easier? Kira considered the question carefully. Thought about the past year, the healing, the rebuilding, the slow process of becoming someone new. Easier, no. Different, yes. She placed a gentle hand on the young woman's shoulder. You learn to carry the weight without letting it crush you. You find people who help you hold it, and eventually you discover that the strength you built surviving can be used to build something better. You really believe that? I live it, every day. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can. That's okay. That's why we're here. Kira guided her toward the entrance. Come on, let me introduce you to some people who felt the same way. They're still here, still fighting, still winning. That night, Kira stood on Victor's porch, watching stars emerge over the Montana mountains. The old Marine joined her with 2 cups of coffee, handing one over without comment. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between people who had seen each other at their worst and best. Your father would be proud, Victor said finally. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Victor took a long sip of coffee. He always worried about you, you know. Said you were too fierce for your own good, too willing to throw yourself into danger. He wasn't wrong. No. But he also said that same fire would change the world someday. He just hoped you'd survive long enough to see it. Kira closed her eyes, feeling the mountain breeze on her face. I almost didn't. So many times. But you did. Victor's voice was fierce. Every time they knocked you down, you got back up. Every time they said it was impossible, you proved them wrong. That's not luck, Kira. That's who you are. And who is that? Someone who refuses to quit. Someone who fights for what matters. Someone who... Victor's voice caught unexpectedly. Someone I'm honored to have known, trained, watched grow into the person standing beside me. Kira opened her eyes, turning to face the man who had been more father to her than anyone since her real father died. Thank you, Victor, for everything. Don't thank me. Just keep going. Keep building. Keep proving that the worst things we survive can become the foundation for the best things we create. She hugged him. Then, something she rarely did, something that felt necessary in this moment. I will. 2 years later, the Willow Creek Veterans Center had expanded to 6 locations across Montana and Wyoming. Kira no longer ran the daily operations. She had trained others to do that. Instead, she focused on what mattered most, sitting with veterans who felt alone, listening to stories that needed to be told, proving through her presence that survival was possible. Jake had proposed on the anniversary of their reunion. A simple ring, a simple question, a simple answer. Yes, the wedding was small. Victor, Patricia, a handful of friends from the community. Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire ceremony and denied it afterward. Chief Patterson walked Kira down the aisle, representing the father she had lost and the family she had found. And when Jake promised to love her, all of her, the healer and the warrior, the gentle and the fierce, Kira believed him completely. Because she had learned something in the years since 12 Navy SEALs had surrounded her in that warehouse. She had learned that strength wasn't about never falling. It was about choosing to stand back up. She had learned that peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of purpose. And she had learned that the quietest people were often the most dangerous, not because of what they could destroy, but because of what they refused to let anyone take away. Her peace, her choices, her right to define her own future. Kira Delgado had been a Marine combat master. Now she was something more. She was a survivor, a builder, a protector of those who needed protecting. They had mocked her calm. They had underestimated her silence. They had learned 12 of them in 2 seconds that the deadliest warriors don't announce themselves. They simply act. And when the fighting was done, they go home. They heal. They build lives worth living. They prove that the darkness never wins forever, not as long as one person chooses to carry the light. The Marine combat master had fought her last battle, and she had won everything that mattered.